on your computer. Okay, first thing we're going to do, these are called compositions. The composition is in a major project, so you can have multiple compositions in the single project file. Okay, let's say we're going to call this Pong. Okay, so if you see right here, right off the bat, it's the wrong aspect ratio. This is a square aspect ratio. I know the dimensions are 1920 by 1080, just like up here. Okay, but we also have these handy presets, so I can go down to the preset. Okay, this handy drop-down menu, and like I said before, broadcast is 2997, but film is 24 frames a second. It's more traditional, so I'm going to choose 24 here. It's all digital online, so it doesn't really matter, but it will give you a different effect. It'll give a more film-like effect if you do choose 24. It's double the rate we just did, so think about that. It's going to be twice as smooth, potentially. Okay, frame rate right here. Square pixels, extremely important. I cannot stress this enough. You need square pixels for your output. There's a thing called widescreen anamorphic. Do not choose those. We need square pixels, okay? So these are the main things we need to get before we start any project. I've seen it happen tragically before where somebody does some brilliant work and it's like DSC, like 720, but it's too small. It's the wrong aspect ratio. It's squished, whatever. So make sure this is solid. Okay, again, if you have your preset HETV, either of these is good. Okay, square pixels, here's where your name is. Okay, background color, default is black. We're going to leave it here. Now if you look up here, we already have our duration. We can preset our duration. This can all be changed later, but it's easier if you set it up here first. So I'm going to do a 5-second animation. Okay, so we have hours, minutes, seconds, frames. Okay, so we're doing 24 frames. So if I type in 24 here, it goes to 26. Do you see that? So I'm going to go back to that. If I go Command K, again, Command K, and it gets up these composition settings. So the other way to do that is composition settings right here, and we have our shortcut right here. Okay, so if you're ever in doubt, and we will be in doubt, I'll say, hey, pull up your composition settings. It's either Command K or go up here. So again, if I type in 24, it will, when I hit enter, it'll go to 27 seconds. So we want to have 0 frames here, and we want to have 0, 5 seconds. Okay, so I hit OK. Now down here, you can see it's frames. So 12 frames. Does everybody see that right here? 12 frames, another 12 frames, and it's 1 second. Okay, so we have 5 seconds of animation. We have a timeline with nothing on it. Okay, if I hit spacebar, it'll play. So that already, everybody should be able to recognize the little timeline like we had in Photoshop. Okay, we're moving through time, which is the 4th dimension. Nothing is on our screen here. Okay, so let's go through kind of what we have. So this is our composition panel here. If we look up here, all this should look pretty familiar to you. There's nothing too scary about it. Okay, it's pretty much like Photoshop. So rectangle tool. Let's kind of start what we did with the ball, but let's kind of take it to the next degree here. So I'm going to hold down rectangle tool. I hold down with my left mouse button, and I can pick from all these shapes. Rectangle. Right here we have our fill color. Okay, I'm going to do, I don't know, let's this nice blue, doesn't matter. Okay, stroke color, let's make it extremely ugly, just so you remember it. Orange. Okay, so it's 3 pixels. It's going to be the stroke. Now I hold down, and look, I create a shape. Okay. Okay, let's just pause here. We have a shape, and it's fine and dandy, but let's make a background. Okay. Now you can do layers. Everything in here is layer based. Okay, but we don't have the layer panel. The layer panel is going to appear down here in the composition. But I want to make a new solid. Okay, a solid is just a shape that covers the entire background. Okay, shortcut is Command Y. We're going to be doing this a lot because right now there's nothing here. If I click this, which toggles the transparency grid, we can see if I exported this but just be on an alpha. So we need a background. Don't be fooled by that, okay? So I hit Command Y, and I bring up our solid settings, okay? The default is make comp size. If you had ever made a different solid, I don't know why you would, or if you move into a different composition size, you might have to hit this again. But again, your readout is right here, these familiar pixels, okay? So if it's 1920 by 1080, it's gonna fill up the whole frame, obviously. I'm gonna make our old paper and just make it white, just so we can see our shapes. I hit OK. And look, it obscured our shape. Now, why did it do that? Because like I said before, it's layer based. So right down here we have our layers, just like in Photoshop. So if I move our shape layer above it, there it is, okay? Simple enough. So I'm going to rename something. I like to rename stuff because it adds clarity, okay? So I'm going to put paper here, maybe pretend paper, okay? I don't want to move this around, so I'm going to lock it. Here's our lock, the column marker. If I go down here, I click this satisfying button, we see the little lock icon, okay? It's locked. You're good to go. I'm going to name this left paddle, okay? Now, this is something that cannot be stressed enough in this program. If I look at my paddle, okay, I hit V is the shortcut for the arrow. Again, the cool thing about these modern Photoshop and all this Adobe tools is if I hover over any of these, do you see the little letter in brackets? That's the shortcut to that tool, okay? So if I go to the hand tool and I can move stuff, I can move the panel. It's kind of helpful sometimes. If I hit V, it goes to the arrow. And I know that because right up here it says V, okay? So you're gonna get these shortcuts down as you're moving through. These are all designed to help you move quickly. So I do V and I can move this, okay? It looks great, it's moving. But do you see this little thing over here? That is its axis point, okay? So for this water bottle, actually, let's go like this. This is our paddle, okay? And this is our anchor point. Now if I want to rotate it, it's going to rotate around wherever this anchor point is, okay? That only gets confusing after you've built a bunch of stuff and then you try to rotate it. Let me demonstrate. First thing we're going to do is rotate this guy here, okay? Very important. You see to the left of this left paddle, this is like the DNA of everything we just created. If I click here, we have our contents, and I can just open up all these aspects of this one little thing we just made, okay? Now, what I don't want you to do is get intimidated by that at all. But do you see what that is? That's a lot of power for you as you get more versed in what's going on, okay? Right now we're going to ignore the contents and we're going to go to our transform. Transform is basically all the very basic things that we're going to be using for this next project, okay? So we have our anchor point, which we just talked about, our position, scale, rotation, opacity. Let's go back to the anchor point. It's at 0, 0, 0, okay? And our position is at 1048 by 522, okay? That's its grid marking here, but the anchor point is at 0, 0. What I want to show is if I go into rotation and I go here, this is degrees, okay? So if I type in 90, it'll be off here, but we can see it, okay? And I zoomed in with our mouse button, okay? The other thing to see is down here. This is our magnification, so I can say fit to 100% or zoom out. It should be pretty familiar to Photoshop, but there's where it is, okay? So I'm going to go back to 0 degrees rotation, okay? And I want to first of all fix this because very rarely, in this class at least, are you ever going to have your anchor point from the center of your shape, okay? So I want this to be here, and this can be extremely frustrating to try to manually figure it out like this. So there's a really basic shortcut that I have to hammer into your head right now, and it's called the pan behind anchor point tool, okay? You click on that and you're like, oh great, now I can move this. I can put it anywhere. Or it's true, you can put it anywhere. So if I put it here and I go to rotate, See, it's a hinge now, okay? That's really cool. The tricky thing is when you're trying to get the center, like so let's say if I'm trying to make an airplane propeller, okay, and I'm going to rotate that, see how it's kind of wonky? Because it's extremely hard to find the center. So shortcut, long story short, you grab your pan behind anchor tool and you double click holding down command, okay? Let's try that again. You see that? So I move it anywhere it is. I select my little paddle here. I have this tool selected. I hold down command and I double click on the shape and it doesn't do anything. No. There it goes. So why is that not doing it? Hold down. Yeah, and so this is what I want to avoid at all costs, is you get into this thing, it's late, you haven't slept, whatever. You don't want to be fiddling around with that aspect. So what I want you guys all to do is immediately in your preferences, and it might be by default because I always tell the classes to do this immediately, is you go into General and right here, Center Anchor Point in New Shape Layers needs to be selected on. That's going to save you a ton of time because very rarely are you going to move it from the center, and it's way easier to move it from the center and put it anywhere arbitrarily. Okay. So I'm going to start over. If I make a new paddle, see how the anchor point always starts in the center? But see, now it went right to the middle. Mathematically, it's going to be perfect, which is what I like to see. Okay. So now if I put position, here's our little things we just went over, okay? And again, I did that really quick. Shortcuts you need to know. P for position. I hit P on my keyboard. Position comes up, okay? We're going to move from P. P is going to be our first one, position, okay? Again, we can access that the slow way by going down to our transform controls, and there's position, okay? This is where we get back to our grid point. Remember when I said X, Y, okay? X is always presented before Y, okay? So these numbers are your X values, and these are your Y values, okay? So like a game of Battleship, knowing that fact, this is my X value. So you see when I click in there and I can move left and right, okay? Up and down, all right? So if I hit 960, let's try that, and I hit 540, we're right in the middle, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? That's our coordinate, that's our, our topography of this thing. And the cool thing is, I think this has built-in math. So if I hit ×2, it'll go to 1920. Yeah, so if you ever get in a bind, you can actually do the math in here. So I'm just hitting divide by 2, and you can work your way back if you have to. But if you ever need to whip out a calculator, you can if you want to get super exact. But just know that that's how this is laid out. Okay, so we have a left paddle. Okay, I'm going to select. Well, I have to rename it. Okay, I'm going to make a right paddle. I hold down Command D and duplicate it. Okay, you can either duplicate it with Command D or Command C, Command V, copy it. We'll get into the differences of those later, but either one works in this instance. I'm going to say right paddle. And I'm going to hit P and move it over to this side of the screen. Okay. Now, who's familiar with the game Pong? Yeah, it's something I didn't even play. It's my parents' game. But the reason it was created is because it was very early in computer science, and they had these grid patterns figured out. So it was easy to program what we're going to do here in no time. But it's just kind of cool to know that history of why it was created. Okay, so I'm going to put this guy here. This guy here. Here's our paddles. We're not going to touch our X values, just our Y's up and down. Okay, so we have our paddles. Now we need a ball. So we go back up to our shape tool, grab this. Let's make a brightly colored, I don't know, nice pinkish ball. Make a garish stroke. Yes. Okay. Here's this ball, or pellet if you like. See that? Really nice, handy. Goes right to the middle. Okay. Ball. Okay. Now, let's go back to what we are doing here in the first place. Animation is instances across time, right? Frame by frame. If we were going to do this like our other way, we would go duplicate the ball, move it, duplicate the ball, move it, duplicate the ball, move it. And that's pretty cool. I mean, that's animation, right? What After Effects does is eliminates all that theory. It goes right out the window, but it's still happening. And what I'm glad, you could animate a lot of stuff and not know the theory that you guys know now, but it's good to know, okay? But I'm going to show you how easy it is to animate in After Effects, at least initially. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to make the start of the game. I'm not quite sure how this worked, but I'm going to have this ball come from off screen, get pounded by these paddles. Okay, so I have V selected. That's kind of our universal move tool, so I can grab our shape. I bring it up. You see how you can still see it. It's nice with After Effects, you can see stuff off screen. Okay, put it up here. I hit P for position, and this is where we're going to do our first animation. Now, when we're animating anything, remember time is the #1 consideration besides position. So I'm going to move our little timeline. This is called the playhead, and look down here to the left. You see over here? This is where we are in time. Okay, frames are down here. There's our frame rate, very handy, and this is our time scale. Okay, so I'm going to go to 0 frames. I'm going to go to our ball. I'm going to make sure it's where I want it. Okay, these numbers are here. They're not necessarily necessary to note, but what is necessary is this handy stopwatch here. Okay, so we're going to hit that stopwatch. As soon as we hit that stopwatch, After Effects immediately knows it's animating. Okay, so watch what happens. I hit the stopwatch. 2 things happen. This becomes blue, meaning it's live, and this is called a keyframe. Okay, so our first keyframe was created over here. Does everybody see that? So I'll undo. I'll hit Apple Z. Again, watch the timeline as I hit this. First keyframe is created. Okay. So I've had problems in the past having people understand what that means and what it doesn't mean, what you need to know. But basically think about a drawing was just created up there. Okay. Now if I hit this play, nothing's happened because we need to create a second keyframe. We have to create where it's going to go. Okay. So I'm going to go, just to keep it simple, I'm going to go to 12, half a second, 12 frames. I'm going to go up to the ball, I'm going to grab it, and you see what just happened. There's our animation trail, okay? A check mark for each frame. There's where it ends up. And look, automatically, without me having to do anything, there's another keyframe, okay? Did you see that on the timeline? 1, 2. So we have start, finish. And what After Effects did, if I play it, it just made each of these drawings in between, or instances. And unlike in Photoshop, we don't have to have 12 balls going there. Okay, they're just automatically created. You don't have to think about it. But what's powerful for you guys to know is you have the theory behind it. Okay, so what's cool here is in Photoshop, if we had done that and we wanted to adjust the timing, think about how we'd have to do that. We'd have to create, if we wanted it slower, right, we would need those frames on there for a longer time. And if we wanted it faster, we would do that. We would have to make more of them in a shorter time. So what we can do here is let's say we want it, who wants it faster? Does it look good? Probably faster? Okay, so all we have to do is let's make it, I don't know, roughly 75% faster. So I go here just eyeballing, and all I have to do is grab this little keyframe. Now it's going to be faster. And you can overemphasize that just to prove a point. But basically, now you're going to be able to play with your timing considerably. So it totally frees up. It totally makes us lazy as animators, because all we have to do is get our keyframes down, what we want it to go, and then we can finesse to death the timing. And so that's why as soon as we move into After Effects, I'm going to anticipate and expect some really careful timing on it, because it's so easy to do. Okay, so let's just kind of play a really quick game here. I'm just going to do really basic, bad animation just to show what can happen. So I don't even know. None of this makes sense in physics or animation. But my goal is to make something that in Photoshop would take a long time to do, and then maybe smooth it out. So let's just have a loop kind of. Okay, so let's look at this monstrosity. it's terrible, but it's there, okay? So the fun thing is now we have this basic thing going on. The timing kind of makes sense in that crappy game, except that's really quick. Let's see. There used to be like a game called Icebreaker or something that I played. So I'm just going to kind of make this just really roughly just to get a feel. Because again, we're sketching before we're making our fine art, right? So everything's going to be a sketch initially. So what do we have to do now? We have to animate our paddles. Okay, so I'm going to close up the ball animation. I'm going to start with just focus on the left paddle. So again, we go to frame 0, we hit P for position. On frame 0, with this left paddle selected, we hit the stopwatch. It creates a keyframe. Okay, so now what's nice is it's tempting to just grab it like this, but then you have to hold down Shift just to go up and down. That's one way to do it. So remember, hold down Shift and it'll go. But I like to animate just with our position things. I'm not paying attention to the numbers. I'm just looking at the screen. Okay, so I can just go like this. So to make it more dramatic, I'll have the paddle down here. All we have to do is go to right when it hits. So I just have to make sure the paddle's up here for that first hit. And there it is. Okay, now we're going to get into making it maybe a little bit more lifelike as we go through, but just to show you guys, there's the first hit. The right paddle is here. Whoever's playing here. I kind of want to have them all in motion, even this guy's just kind of doesn't really know where it's going to go. And there it is. See, he guessed too well, so I'll have it hovering up here. He comes down here. Again, X and Y. This guy's here. He's just a ninja. This guy needs to go back up here. Down here. Again, this is okay. Maybe I'll make this a 3-minute animation. But hopefully this is hammering home how easy it is to do this. Okay, let's see if all the balls hook up. Oh, see what the heck happened here? So I just have to go to my left paddle. Pick it up here. Okay, so again, I can manipulate these anytime just by clicking on them, very simply. Okay, so ignoring what's totally wrong with this, let's just talk about keyframing a little bit and how After Effects deals with keyframing. Let's focus on the ball. Okay, if I hit, our ball has animations, we can see our lines. See how they're looping? Okay, that's because After Effects automatically creates what's called a Bezier curve, a slow curve on any animation that's created automatically. So that's going to be the default. I expect more from you guys. And we're going to go into this keyframing later, but this is just our intro, so let's just keep it real basic. If I hit U on the ball, everything that's animated comes up, okay? That's going to be real handy when you're animating transparency, position, rotation all at once. If I hit U, all the things that I've animated comes up. So here's all my keyframes. We're going to go into the graph editor later, but right now let's just familiarize ourselves with it really basically. So the graph editors, we're going to really refine our keyframing, okay? I click on it, all of a sudden we see the motion interpretation of this, okay? Now it doesn't make a lot of sense right now, which is fine. And I'm just hesitating because I'm wondering about how detailed we need to go into this right now. Let's just, like, you guys are smart. Let's go into it. Okay, there's the graph. There's our things. Right down here is our separate dimensions. Okay. Remember, we're dealing with what dimensions? X and Y, left and right. Yeah, up and down. So we have a red and a green. So we want to separate because by default it puts them together. So I'm going to hit this, okay? And suddenly, look, X is going to be red, Y is going to be green. Okay, simple enough. So let's look at our X position. That's its left to right value, okay? Now what I want is just to keep this real simple and make everything super sharp. So you see these little curves here? If I manipulate these, see that curve reflected up there? Okay. I just want you to know that there are curves that exist. So I'm going to close up this. I'm going to go to these guys. And let's make them back into one dimension. Trust me, we'll get into this more in detail later, but just for now, know it exists. But what we're going to focus on is the keyframes. So here's how the default keyframes look. What I want to make them be is just more sharp. So I'm going to select them, holding down Shift and our mouse. Okay. I'm going to right click once they're all selected. And you see where it says keyframe interpolation. Okay. That's how it's going to deal with the keyframes. So I click on that. And we are in linear. So we can do to Bezier. What I want is everything to be linear. And let's see if that sharpens it up. You see how they're now very sharp. Okay, very sharp means very sharp action on screen. So it's similar to when we did our bouncing ball thing, right? Most of us created very cartoony, rolling, bouncing things. So it'd be these nice Bezier curves of we were actually drawing them or animating them. We could see them. Okay. Now imagine the same animation with a ball falling off, but it was a cue ball on like a marble floor. It'd be like a sharp hit, right? Like there's not any squish or squash in that. So that's kind of what this Pong thing is. So now that these are jagged and sharp, let's see how it just looks. You see how it's just sharper and it feels even already just like it's more like that game was. I don't know if you've seen the game, but that's how there's no holding, there's no slow in to slow out on that. It's just sharp action, okay? So it's kind of pleasing to the eye. Nice and sharp, very predictable. So that's linear interpolation. Okay, now the handles on the other hand are being controlled by our person. So these should be a little bit more loopy, hesitant, you know, kind of moving around. We could put in some basic up-down stuff in here while this person's kind of wondering where it's going to go. And so there should be a little bit more life to them. So it's not terrible, but let's look at how we can just very quickly help those out. So I go select them all again. I right-click, okay, and I go into Keyframe Assistant, okay. Now, Keyframe Assistant is going to be your friend, and don't let it be your enemy. We use it a lot, like all the time, just to set very simple, pleasing ins and outs. So it's very simple motion. This is going to make more sense to you guys when you have this project in your own hands. So I'm just going to very quickly just say easy ease, and that means easing in and easing out on that Bezier curve. And you see the shape of them turned into hourglass shapes. That's the signal for that. So let's see if that changed anything. See, it's hard to tell in this example, but it is a little bit smoother and more lifelike. So I'm going to do that here again. P position. Change those Bezier curves. Okay. And I right-click on it and onto my keyframes. Easy ease. Okay. Okay. So I think that's enough for this one thing. Does everybody want to try this on their computers? Okay.